I'd like to introduce Valerie Vargas, who is a tattooist from London Frith Street Tattoo Parlour, and she's been working for 6 years there, but is already one of the most popular tattooists in London. And she's going to be talking about tattoos. So, welcome.
Hi everyone. All right, so my name is Valerie and I do work at Frith Street Tattoos. I've been tattooing now for about 6 years, and in that time I've managed to get fairly busy and fairly booked up. I don't really know why, but it's worked out that way. Now, I started getting into tattoos when I was about 18. I started to get tattooed a little bit here, a little bit there, and then by the time I was about 23, 24, I kind of really knew that I wanted to get into it permanently as a career. I managed to get a tattoo apprenticeship, which is one way to get into it. It's probably, in my opinion, one of the better ways to do it. It means you have a tutor that can tell you when you're making mistakes and when you're doing things right, which is much better than if you go into it, obviously, on your own. Now, I got my apprenticeship back in 2004, and I was there for roughly about 2 years. And I met a few people along the way that shaped how I treated tattooing and how I wanted to find myself within tattooing, really. One of them was obviously my mentor at the time. He'd been tattooing 16 years. And he'd been all over the world. He started off in Ireland, he was Irish, and ended up in Scotland, but he'd been to Australia and America as well. He taught me the perspective of lineage, so to speak, really within tattooing, which a lot of media doesn't tend to focus on. It is a centuries-old craft, and he taught me about who came before me, why it was important to be aware of this. But at the same time, I had a friendship with a young man called Stuart, who eventually became my fiancé, and he started tattooing around about the same time as me. Now, how he shaped the way that I became the tattooer that I am today is that he also paid a lot of attention about the lineage and the tradition built within tattooing, and he introduced me to a lot of tattooers that are still currently some of my heroes and my favourite type of tattooers, such as some of you might have heard of Ed Hardy. Now, a lot of people have heard of him because he was tied in with a bit of a fashion line that was infamous, I should call. Now, if you try and ignore that side of things, good, because he essentially just sold the designs and they took it to a really horrible level. But as a tattooer himself, he started tattooing in the late 60s, and by the 80s he was, well, even by the 70s, he was world-renowned. He is almost what I would denominate as the father of modern tattooing. There was obviously tattooing centuries ago, and the most prolific would have been Japanese-style tattooing. Now, the reason why I would denominate him as the father of modern tattooing is because he took a lot of these styles, such as Japanese, modern, traditional, mixed them up, which nobody had really done before, and it just opened the floodgates, really. It just became far more accessible. It wasn't really just bikers that got tattooed, or sailors, you know. It kind of really opened it up to many more people. Now, the kind of style of tattooing that I've been kind of known for really is more Western traditional. You're talking about bolder lines, bright colors, you know, tattoos no bigger than the size of your hand, I would imagine. And I look to him as a huge inspiration because he was able to take something that had been unchanged for centuries and was able to kind of open it up to a new audience, including myself, people like me that might have otherwise never really joined tattooing in the past. Women in tattooing have been fairly underrepresented for the last couple of 100 years, really, and it's only in the last, from a personal standpoint, the last 3 decades that more women have been coming forward and into the game of tattooing, really, so to speak. This is probably because of, before somebody might get one tattoo and then that would be it. And now people are getting more and more and more tattoos. And I think maybe they started round about in the mid-80s when people stopped thinking, oh, it's only bad people that get tattoos. And then now people would maybe get one and their mum would be like, oh, that's not so bad, whatever. And, I think a lot of people still, some of the first few questions I ever ask my customers is, well, what does your mum think? What does your dad think? Because a lot of people still don't want to disappoint their parents. They see tattoos as sometimes it can be a bit of a disappointment, sadly. Now, I would say about kind of going back to the whole tradition thing and the lineage, all these things have been kind of adding up, and in the last couple of decades, I think it's gotten to the point that those stereotypes no longer hold true, really. And that's why I'm able to be a tattooer. A young woman that otherwise would have not lasted 2 minutes in a tattoo parlor would have been probably chucked out or laughed at or whatever. Now, I think a lot of opinions have been shifting, really, and I'm seeing more and more younger women coming into the studio to get tattooed and wanting larger and larger work. Partly, you could say, it's because they're seeing more prolific kind of women that are in the media making money and are being successful, getting more and more tattoos, such as, for example, Rihanna. She's probably the most famous one, I guess, and she's getting quite a lot of heavy coverage, and a lot of girls are going, well, I like it, I'm going to get it, and I think that's a good thing, as long as it's measured and thought about, because at the end of the day, they are permanent, and that can be a big problem, really. We do have to sometimes talk people out of getting tattoos at the studio, which is a strange thing, that you would go in saying, I want a tattoo, and we try and talk you out of it. Mostly that kind of happens when they do want to exactly copy somebody's design. Going back to Rihanna, she's got a few things on her hands, and to be honest, something so permanently visible, whether it's on your neck or on your hands in a line of work, such as working in a shop, you know, that's not really going to hold for much longer, I don't think. It's already going to wane a little bit. I think we've reached the peak of popularity of tattooing, and now I'm seeing a bit of a downturn, and we'll see kind of how that goes, really, because obviously all these people that were getting tattooed, I'd like to think that they'll carry on getting tattooed, otherwise I'm out of a job, but, you know. Women in tattooing, I think my own perspective from within tattooing, I personally don't see any kind of mistreatment or any bullying going on towards female tattooers. I think outside of tattooing, the media really focuses hard on women tattooers as being overly sexual, and it can really put a dampener. I have had a few bad incidents where I've had a few customers that can sometimes ask some really horrible questions and very inappropriate questions. It's not happened often at all, and usually you can spot them a mile off, so that's fine. But I think it's a fine line to be a tattooed woman, to be honest. I think media wants you to be sexy and to have tattoos, and that's very in at the minute, but at the same time, they don't want you to be too sexy, because then you're just a bit of a slut. So it's you can't really win in this situation. So best thing to do is just try and be yourself, really. Just, if you want to have tattoos, make sure you want them and you get what you want, and don't try and impress anybody, personally speaking. So, but I think that's pretty much everything. I mean, if anybody's got any questions before I step down, otherwise, yeah.
What's the most popular tattoos that most young women go for, and do you always get a bit like phrased out about why they want that particular style?
I mean, I always ask people while I'm tattooing them, oh, why did you choose this or whatever, you know, just, I don't expect a full 2-hour story, but I think the most popular thing at the minute is probably, as a first tattoo for a young woman, would sadly be on a fairly visible area, such as a hand or a finger. A lot of people think, oh, it's only little, and it is little, but, you know, it's something that's permanently visible, and a lot of people think, oh, I can cover it with a wristwatch or a ring or whatever, but, you know, as tattoos age and your kind of body kind of changes shape and everything, sometimes you might get it here and it might end up there by the time you're 60, and we have to explain these things, and we do try and talk people out of visible tattoos, permanently visible tattoos anyhow. But usually they'll start off with something small still, but then they quickly seem to graduate onto much larger work, almost by the second or even third tattoo, which wasn't really seen before. 80s, 90s, people would stick to small tattoos for a long time before maybe graduating, if graduating at all, really. But thank you. Anything else? Nope. Cool. Well, thank you very much, guys. Enjoy the day.